If you are someone who has just started with your CAT preparation, you would be wondering as to what does the CAT look like and what exactly is the pattern of the test. So we'll try to give you a brief overview of what to expect when you are going to appear for the CAT. Now if you look at the overview of CAT 22, which was similar to what happened in CAT 2021 as well, you will see that there were 3 slots in which this test was conducted. So what happens is CAT is conducted on the same day for all the people who intend to take it, but it happens in 3 different slots. Now needless to say, these 3 slots will have different papers because you don't really need people in the last slot to have an advantage in terms of what to expect. So what happens in this case is there will be 3 different tests that will be conducted. You are supposed to take the test in one of the 3 slots which will be given to you randomly. So you are not expected to choose the slot, it will be given to you randomly. Now each slot will have 66 questions. So in this particular case, these 66 questions were divided into 3 sections. Now these 3 sections, as we will see later, will cover the basics of math, LRDI and verbal. Now these 3 sections are timed. So it will happen that you will have to attempt the first section in a certain amount of time, 40 minutes in this case, followed by the next section, 40 minutes again for the second section and 40 minutes for the third section. Even if you finish the first section in say 30 minutes, you will not be able to utilize the remaining 10 minutes in any other section. Similarly, if you are at the second section and suddenly realize that you could have answered the first section in a different manner, you will not be able to go back to the first section. So the sections are stand-alone tests of 40 minutes each and they have to attempt it in a predefined order. That is basically how the CAT will be presented to you. Also, the CAT is a computer-based test, meaning that every person in a particular slot will have the same set of questions. Now these questions can be presented in a different order within a section, but everyone will get to experience the same 66 questions that are a part of a particular slot. Now if you look at the marking scheme for the CAT, you have +3 and -1 for questions that we call MCQs. So MCQs are nothing but multiple choice questions wherein each question will have 4 options, out of which exactly 1 option is the right answer and the remaining 3 options are incorrect answers. So for selecting the correct answer, you end up getting +3, and for marking an incorrect answer, you end up getting a penalty of 1 mark. So the pattern is +3 -1 for MCQ questions. Last year, if you look at it, out of the 66 questions that were there were 49 questions that were MCQs in nature, meaning that they had multiple options out of which you had to select the correct answer. The remaining 17 questions last year were something that we call theta questions. Now theta questions are type in the answer questions, wherein what happens is when you come up with an answer, you have to enter the answer in a box. So if your answer is say 125, you will have to click 1, 2, 5 and save your answer. There will not be any options for these question types. Now the beauty of these question types is that if you answer correctly, then you get a +3 for your effort. But if you get an answer wrong, so let's say for example, in the same example, you had marked the answer as 125, but the correct answer was say 100. So in that case, what will happen is you will not lose any marks if you have marked the wrong answer. And because of that, theta questions are the ones that we usually recommend people to attempt without any fear. Now coming to the sections, the first section at the CAT is going to be verbal ability and reading comprehension, or popularly known as the verbal section. So in this, you will have passages followed by some questions, and you will also have stand-alone questions that will be based on say jumbled paragraphs or summary of paragraphs or missing sentence in a particular paragraph, or you might also have to find the odd sentence in a jumbled paragraph. So those question types can appear in the form of verbal ability, and the passages will be a part of the reading comprehension part of the VARC section. Last year we had 24 questions in the VARC section, and 16 of them were based on reading comprehension and 8 of them were based on verbal ability. Now once you have attempted this section in 40 minutes, the second section that will appear in front of you will be the data interpretation and logical reasoning section. In this section, you will have questions in the form of sets, meaning that there will be a common data that will be given to you, and on the basis of that there will be some questions that you need to answer. In CAT 2022, there were 4 sets that were present and each set had 5 questions. So there were 20 questions in total that were a part of the data interpretation section. Now, in this particular case, data interpretation and logical reasoning might have questions which will be from, say, arrangements, set theory, Venn diagrams, critical path, binary logic, table based, pie chart based, graph based questions, and so on. So all those will constitute these 20 questions that we are talking about in the data interpretation and logical reasoning section. Once you are done with the data interpretation and logical reasoning section, the third section will be that of quantitative ability. So in CAT 2022, there were 22 questions that were a part of the quantitative ability section. Now these questions are standalone in nature and you will not really have them in the form of sets. So each question will have to be answered independently of the rest of them, and you will have choices in terms of which questions to go for and which questions to leave. So that will be the last section in your test. Each section will be of 40 minutes and by the end of 120 minutes you would have been done with the test. Now there is this one small bit which will help you in case you are not very good at calculations. So there is a basic on-screen calculator that is available which will help you perform the basic operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication and division that will be made available to you for the quantitative ability and the data interpretation and logical reasoning sections. So it will get activated as soon as you reach those sections. You can just click on the numbers that are there and perform the operations that will help you arrive at the correct answer. Now that is what CAT looks like. In terms of what to expect in terms of score and percentile, if you look at the data that we arrived at after CAT 2022, you will see that the score versus percentile for the VARC section, the LRDI section and the QA section have been mentioned in this grid. So if you just want to read this table, you can say that for VARC, if you were to get a 90th percentile, you had to score 23 marks. If you were to score a 95th percentile at the LRDI, then you should have scored 19 marks. Now how do we arrive at these numbers is by answering questions correctly. So let's say for example, you intend to score at least a VARC or at least a 90 percentile at VARC, then you need to get 23 marks, meaning that you need to get 8 answers right. Now there is no penalty as such in case there are 2 people at the same score but have answered a different number of questions incorrectly. So let's say for example, someone has got 8 answers right and has got a 24 score, will get more or less a 90th percentile, and someone else who has answered say 9 questions correctly but 3 questions incorrectly and has invited -3 will also get 24 marks and will also be at the 90th percentile itself. So even if you get more answers wrong, it's still okay. You are going to get the same percentile as someone else with the same score. So that is how you interpret this table. Now there are a few observations which might also be your benchmarks if you have started preparing for the CAT. So the first benchmark is 25% of the total marks. So I'm sure you would have taken a lot of tests by now and you would have seen various passing marks that are there. So in some tests your passing percentage would be 50% of the total marks, in some tests it would have been 40%, 35% and so on. So in terms of the CAT, there is no passing the CAT or failing the CAT. It's purely in terms of percentile. So you have to do well at a relative level. But if you look at absolute numbers as well, if someone would have scored 25% of the total marks, so the total marks last year was 198 because there were 66 questions and there were 3 marks that were awarded for each correct answer. So out of say 198 marks, if someone would have got 25% of the total marks or roughly 50 marks, then that person would have been at the 90th percentile. So 25% of the total marks is good enough for you to get a 90th percentile or for you to be in the top 10% of the test taking population. Now let's say for example, you would have scored 30% of the total marks. So out of 198 marks, say you would have got somewhere around 60 marks, then you would be at the 95th percentile. And if someone aspires to get a 99th percentile, then the benchmark here will be 40 to 45% of the total marks. So if someone would have got 40% of the total marks, then that person would have got a 99th percentile. Now if you cross the 90th percentile, almost invariably you will be in contention for many of the top institutes, even including some of the IIMs. If you get a 99th percentile, then you will be in contention for most of the institutes on the basis of your profile as well, but you should get multiple calls for interviews from many of the top institutes. So these should ideally be your benchmarks when you're preparing for the CAT. I hope it's clear to you what the pattern of the CAT looks like and what exactly should be your target when you're starting to prepare for the CAT. Wishing you all the best with your CAT prep.